Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at Venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
Hello and welcome to Under the Dome, the News and Observer's political podcast. I am reporter Will Doran here with my colleague Don Vaughan. We are recording this at the state legislature in the beautiful closet of the press dungeon, as we like to call it, down here in our room for the reporters. We were recording this last Thursday, where it's been just a really busy week, but we are here to tell you about what is coming up this week in North Carolina politics. Two big things, really, and it's just been, like I said, it was jam-packed last week. We had new congressional maps and new legislative maps getting passed through the legislature with really different levels of partisan rancor. Some of them were almost unanimous. Some of them were completely along party lines. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that and why it's important. Why it's important really is that this week the court in the redistricting case is going to be figuring out whether or not to accept the maps that the legislature just passed, or if they're going to say not good enough and go with another set of maps. So that is something to keep an eye on. And then the other big thing was mask mandates. COVID is still with us, and people are getting a little sick and tired of wearing their masks all the time. And so both the governor and the legislature are softening. Well, the legislature has been there on mask mandates, but they still have some disagreements, and that resulted in a bill that could potentially be vetoed by the governor this week, could potentially be signed into law this week. Don, tell us a little bit more about what's been going on with the masks.
I mean, it's sort of moot, but it's sort of not. And, it's always about like the intersection of like different levels of government. And that's what this is. So not just between legislative and executive, but between state and local. So Friday, at nearly the exact same time that the Senate was taking a vote, Governor Cooper and State DHHS Secretary Cody Kinsley were saying at a press briefing that they think that the local mask mandates that cities and counties have and the mask mandates in schools, which has been the site of most of the controversy around masks this past year, should be lifted. So that's a big deal. It hasn't been a state mandate since last summer, but again, that has a caveat. So the Cooper, as we all remember, after the CDC changed last May, 2021, there was no statewide mask mandate, but there was in some places, because there's always a but in government. And it included schools and prisons and healthcare and transit. And then when state law passed that Cooper signed in the fall, that changed it. So it's not the state making this rule, it's the local school districts that decide whether mask mandates are in place. However, they were strongly recommended to have mask mandates from this DHHS public school safety toolkit. So it's that toolkit, the recommendations from DHHS, which has been the big thing for a while, including a county that didn't have masks and then got the stern letter from former DHHS Secretary Cohen threatening legal action, and then that got people riled up saying, well, this is the Cooper administration saying that we are required to mask in schools. But technically they didn't, but also they did. So that's the background. And now Omicron is, just has fallen off the cliff. Vaccines are available for everyone 5 and up, which is, the vast majority of school children, unless it's preschool or a young kindergartner. And so they're recommending that they lift it because you can get vaccinated, and that's what they've been pushing for a while. But now we're at the point of, okay, so all those school boards and all those mayors and all the, however the local governments decide, they're at the point now of needing to lift their their local ordinances, if they even have one. A lot of people don't.
Well, this is something that's really been shifting because, I mean, as you noted, like we had the statewide mandate, but then we lifted it and just let it be up to local school boards. But even in the beginning, it was still essentially statewide. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I mean, it was something, 85-90% of school districts in the state initially had chosen to keep the mandates, even after the state was no longer requiring them to. But over time, that's kind of slowly trickled down. I mean, it made big national headlines, when Madison Cawthorn brought a big group of supporters down to Johnston County to rally against it.
Right.
But, I remember seeing that on The Daily Show, and that was, I don't know, months ago, last summer. But, there's kind of been that steady trickle of, month by month, more school districts have voted to get rid of these mandates, and now I think it's down to below half, right? Am I correct on that?
It's really almost been just the past month. So we have the loudest people, which are the angry protesters and politicians that try to use it to get attention. And then we have the people who are very worried and concerned and don't want masks at all and probably aren't going to like, this new recommendation. And then in the middle, you have everybody else who is I want to protect my kids. And, what does it actually look like? And, what does this mean if they're going to miss school or are they going to get sick? And there's, they're looking more at how much of a threat is COVID really right now? Risk mitigation, And,
well, it's been really confusing. I mean, both of us are parents, and it seems like the CDC changes the rules every other month, and what to do if your kid's been exposed. And
they have. I mean, the key was, if you were vaccinated in Wake County anyway. I'm a Wake County parent. If you were exposed but you're vaccinated, it's not a problem. If you're not vaccinated, you had this different timeline of when you were out and everything. So, it's been interesting as a parent to watch and. But I mean, I think it's up to each individual parent and kid whether or not they think it mattered that much with masks. Depends on compliance and on enforcement. And now that this is lifted, I think that it's going to be a relief for a lot of people and celebration for some, probably concern for some others. And one thing that Governor Cooper and Secretary Kinsley each of them said when they talked about urging lifting masks in the state capital of Raleigh, for our listeners here, Raleigh has had a mask mandate instituted by Mayor Baldwin since August. And by the time you're listening to this, maybe it'll be gone, probably, or will be soon. So it feels like our lives haven't changed very much. But out in other counties where it's been gone, it might seem weird that they don't have it around town, but then they would in school, depending, So it feels like it's this... It just feels really it's individual to where you happen to live. And now with this encouragement from the governor, even though he wasn't making this rule, it seems like the mayors and others will follow suit. Maybe not. I mean, I worked in Durham for a long time. I know what Durham's politics are. And because this is somewhat partisan issue on COVID restrictions, or is Durham and Chapel Hill going to change? I think that's different, So the bill that passed the legislature that Cooper's got to decide what to do with, and I asked him about it at the presser, and he, the usual, he'll never say if he'll sign or not sign something until he decides he's going to say it, was, that he would look at it, but that he has reservations because what the bill does is leave it to the parents, not the local school boards anymore. And it was the Republicans' choice in that bill last year that Cooper signed into law that forces the school boards to vote every month. Now, this bill that they passed repeals that, so they don't have to vote anymore because, why would they?
They don't have the power to vote on it anyways.
Right, the parents would get to decide. So the way Cooper was talking is that he does want to let the school board still have this measure if they want, if they feel like, even though he doesn't recommend it. The state's not officially recommending it, but giving them that jurisdiction for public health. So that's where the intersection of state and local is at play. Because I even asked, I was like, well, what if they don't want to? And he's like, well, this is the guidance that they'll have. So March 7th is the date of that guidance, but March 7th is not the date that suddenly all local municipalities and school districts can or should lift their mask rules. It's just when they're going to have more detailed guidance. They can do it right now if they want to. They can do it yesterday. Half of them did. So it's more than half now. At our last count, our education reporter, Kern Huey, said, I think it tipped over into the majority do not have it even before this announcement came out.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it's clearly heading that direction. And I mean, I'll say here at the legislature, I mean, we saw plenty of GOP lawmakers kind of taking credit for pushing Cooper in this direction. He scheduled his press conference on this for the same day that they were taking votes on the bill, and I saw several Republican lawmakers basically saying like, "Oh yeah, we did that. We forced his hand."
I asked Senator Berger directly on Tuesday. I said I hadn't seen Moore in person that day, and I saw Berger first, so I asked him. Even though this was the legislation is driven by Speaker Moore. And I already knew the Senate, Republican leadership supported it. And I asked if, he's like, well, I'm too far to say that. But clearly, I mean, that's how this came out with schools reopening. There was legislation, there were Cooper pressers, and then, they met in the middle. No joint announcement this time, but so it all happens. It was a lot of fun for me to speed over to the Emergency Operations Center. I'm joking. It was not fun. And trying to figure out the vote at the same time.
Well, speaking of Republican lawmakers getting their way and bringing some Democrats on board, we also had redistricting where that happened a little bit, not entirely. So they're drawing 3 new maps to replace the maps that all just got ruled unconstitutional by the state Supreme Court. Earlier this month, you've got the state House map, the state Senate map, and the U.S. congressional map. One of those was basically unanimous. The map for the NC House districts passed, I think the vote was like 115-5. There were a few Democrats who still opposed it, but nearly every Democrat supported it, and every Republican supported it. And that is a really interesting map. There will be obviously a ton more deep dives into this, especially if it does get passed, because what we're still waiting on to see is if the court even accepts this. The court might say, no, y'all, this ain't good enough, and we are picking a different option. And that will be happening towards the end of this week, so I'll be writing about that. Keep your eyes peeled for that. But it's a really intriguing map, just kind of baseline looking at how the districts, if they had existed in 2020, how they would have performed. A small majority of them, I think like 63 of the 120 House districts, would have voted for Donald Trump in the presidential race, but almost the same number, 62, would have voted for Roy Cooper in the governor's race. And now, obviously, Cooper is kind of a special candidate. I think, people would agree in North Carolina. He is a Democrat who's able to win over a lot of, kind of conservative middle ground voters who are, comfortable with voting for Donald Trump, but also are going to vote for Roy Cooper for governor. So, some Democrats kind of discounted that way of, gauging the partisan split of the map. But, I mean, the fact is, if Roy Cooper clones had been running in every single legislative district in the state in 2020, Democrats would have won a majority under this map. So, I think probably some folks in Democratic leadership looked at that and said, y'all, I don't know if we're going to get a better deal out of Republicans on this. Like, yeah, it is still a, Republican-leaning map, but, it's at least possible for Democrats to win a majority. And that was part of what the court had focused on in their ruling. They said basically, these maps are unconstitutional for, because of all these, highly technical math reasons, but, let's also just say philosophically, there's no way that if Democrats even won the statewide vote by 4 or 5% of the vote, there's no way that they would win a majority of seats in the legislature. So clearly lawmakers, had that in mind. That part of the ruling when they drew these maps, it does give Democrats a path to the majority. It obviously does not guarantee them the majority, but there's the path there. However, we did not get that same kind of kumbaya in the Senate, where everything was really just a knockdown, drag-out fight over both the congressional maps and the state Senate maps. Those passed entirely along party lines. Democrats are saying that they are still just, gerrymandered as can be. Republicans saying that, Democrats are just full of it and complaining because they felt like they should have gotten a few more seats and they didn't. So, depending on who you talk to, the other side is not being truthful and,
Do you think this is the last map week? We got a couple more weeks of maps?
This could probably be it. I mean, who knows? So the state Supreme Court could still come in and delay the primary and move it back to June. But for now, the primary is in May. And because the primary is in May and we have to have early voting, that means that candidate filing has to begin on February 24th, which, if you look up at your calendar, is very soon. So
days.
Yeah. It's about a little over a week away. And so the court is giving itself this week to review these maps that the legislature submitted. They're also going to be reviewing any maps that the challengers in this lawsuit, the left-leaning groups who sued, submit. They're also allowed to submit their own maps to the court. Then the court is going to basically pick which maps it thinks are the best and go with those.
It's literally this Thursday from when you listen to this. If you're listening to this on Monday, it's like a few days.
Yeah.
Like, working on deadline where they have a bunch of reporters.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, we were at the legislature till, from 8:30 in the morning till 10:30 at night the other day. I mean, this is, burning the midnight
Y'all
oil.
give a shout out to Will and the other, my beat is the budget and things like that. And so... I mean, that certainly is a legislative issue that drug out to the end of time.
Oh, yeah. We've all had our share of midnight votes here.
Shout out to Will and Murph and others that spent long hours in this building. So.
But, I mean, they were still finding, computer errors in their maps at 2 a.m., they came back and said one day. So, somebody was up at, 3 to relay the message.
Maybe we should shout out the staffers.
Yeah, the poor nonpartisan and partisan staffers who have been working on this. I don't know if they've slept at all. But yeah, I mean, really, I'll just end with this on the congressional map. The current congressional map is guaranteed to be at least 10-4 advantage for Republicans. In our 14 seats, Republicans would win at least 10 of them. They might win 11. That got ruled unconstitutional. The new map that GOP lawmakers have proposed could hypothetically also still lead to a 10-4 result. However, and this is why they say that this map should be accepted by the court, unlike the maps that just got struck down, the same map that could lead to a 10-4 split for Republicans could also give Democrats an advantage of 8-6. And that's because the way it's drawn is you've got 6 safe Republican seats, 4 safe Democratic seats, and 4 super, super competitive seats that are all separated by just a couple of percentage points. It could hypothetically go one way or the other. 3 of those 4 are Republican-leaning, 1 is Democratic-leaning. But really, it's just kind of, if one party has a good year, they could very feasibly win all 4 of those. Or 3 of the 4, or, maybe 2 of the 4. But probably you would expect, we've been covering politics on this, this, Don. All races are so nationalized now that, you typically tend to expect that, most races will go one way or another. But, Democrats could win 8-6, Republicans could win 10-4, but, that's what a lot of people had asked for in these maps. They said, we want competitive seats. We want to see politicians actually have to fight for their votes. We don't want this kind of map where everything is a predetermined conclusion. There's no, real threat to anybody in the general election. Everything just gets decided in the primary, and then all the general election, are like 60-40, 70-30, and none of the incumbents are ever really at risk. Like people want competition. So it'll be interesting to see what the court has to say about that. The Democrats weren't a big fan of that map. They said it was still gerrymandered. They proposed one that would actually be a little less competitive and would have given Democrats more guaranteed seats. As you can imagine, Republicans were not too keen on that, and so they shot that down. But 4 competitive seats, that's a pretty decent amount. So we'll see what the court thinks about that. And I think with that, we'll leave you guys to watch the news. Stay tuned. Maybe our election date will be changing. Maybe we'll know what the maps look like. It's all in flux
for election season.
And maybe masks will be an issue come November, maybe masks won't be an issue come November.
Don't jinx it.
You know, it's seeming like the two parties are kind of coming to an agreement on that, at least a little bit.
Keyword is endemic.
So, as always, stay tuned, and thank you for listening.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Under the Dome and NC Insider, and sign up for our weekly political newsletter at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.